Make sure he's good. Hello, my dear. Hello, Dr. Marco. How are you? Welcome to Health
Oh, I'm
Mastery for
good. Can you hear me
Leaders.
okay?
I can hear you so good. So good.
Excellent. Very good. Can you see
So
me?
we can see you. We can hear you. I know it's like, where in the world are we?
Yes.
Where are you coming in from again?
I'm in Markham, Ontario. It's just north of Toronto, basically.
There we go.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we have speakers from all over. We get speakers from Europe, speakers from Toronto, speakers from Canada.
That's
So
great.
welcome. So let me introduce you before you go ahead and do a deep dive into all the beautiful things chiropractic. So
Okay.
Dr. Marco Caravaggio is a pediatric and family wellness chiropractor. He graduated with honors from Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College in 1994. After a year of practice in Toronto, he moved to Italy, where he spent the next 15 years building and growing a family wellness practice. Now he's back in Toronto, as he just said, and he's providing chiropractic care to patients of all ages, integrating teachings he received from some of the best European experts with the current North American advanced skills and experience into the services he provides. Dr. Marco has had so much success improving the health of people with many diverse problems, but has a special passion for helping pregnant moms, newborns, and growing kids, as well as athletes. He has taken extensive postgraduate studies in chiropractic functional neurology, and he practices a light form of chiropractic called network spinal that involves light touches in very specific spots on the body to actually activate the body's self-healing strategies. He is also known as the first chiropractor in Canada to be certified in a technique known as the zone technique, which was taught by the world famous chiropractor to best athletes in the world, Dr. Peter Goldman. Dr. Caravaggio is a health and wellness enthusiast, international educator, public speaker, published author, amateur drummer, and finally, a husband and a father. So he is going to talk to us all about the effects of stress on brain balance and developmental, leading to postural problems and inflammation. So welcome again. And why don't you go ahead and start talking about chiropractic care and what it's good for?
All right. Very good. So, thanks everyone. Thanks for having me here. And so this is my first ever summit. So hopefully I'm excited and hopefully I'll be able to relay some great information. And like I said, I've got many years of practicing lots of patients over the years. And what I'm going to try to do is talk about neurology, but talk about it in a simple way. People have said that I have some pretty good analogies and I kind of help the common person. So I'm not going to try to talk too technical. I'm just going to I'm just going to say there's a certain part of the brain that might do this and a certain part of the brain that might do that. And I might name one or two of them. So some people know that I might know what I'm talking about, but that's kind of what I want to do. So, as she mentioned, I've done a lot of work, and I do a lot of work with autistic kids and kids on the spectrum as well. So you might hear me interjecting certain things about that along the way as I'm describing things that might be happening. So once again, I say I'm not a neurologist. I feel like, there's the guy that just graduated and knows a certain amount of stuff. I've done a lot of studying. I'm sort of in the middle, but I'm not like an expert. And so I'm going to say, as far as I understand, as far as my understanding is, that's what I'm going to be relaying to most of you. So that's my first little caveat of what I'm going to say. So I wanted to tell everyone there's kind of three general categories of chiropractic. Okay, there's three sort of types because a lot of people have gone to chiropractors and they've had different experiences. And I tell people it's kind of like going to for a massage. There's different types of massage therapy, right? I can get hot stone massage, I could get deep tissue massage, I could get a relaxation massage, a lymphatic drainage massage. So they're not necessarily good or bad, and one isn't necessarily better than the other. There's just different ways of doing it. There's different thoughts, different ways people are taught in school. And a lot of times people end up doing what they like getting done on themselves. That's often what happens. So in chiropractic, I say there's three global categories of how chiropractors work. One category is called regional, where the chiropractor says, somebody says my neck hurts and they might give you a neck adjustment, or my low back hurts and I'll give you a low back adjustment. That's kind of one type. There's another global category called postural, or where they're actually trying to physically make sure that the spine has all the right curves, and they're really trying to work hard to make sure the spine has all the right curves in it. And then my techniques that I usually is called tonal, like the tone of a guitar string. the tonal techniques are usually lighter and they're lighter application. They might just be doing a very light touch up here, the bones in the upper neck, or the light touch technique that I do, very light, quick touches in certain spots of the body. And the tonal techniques are looking more at a global aspect of trying to generally help the nervous system try to regulate itself and function more in a harmonious way. So we're not necessarily going to where it hurts or the sections necessarily. We're trying to do a more global approach. That's kind of what my tonal techniques are. The network spinal care is directed at that. Other techniques might be upper cervical techniques. There's some handheld instruments that kind of might do some of that work as well. So those are kind of the three global categories of chiropractic, just so I have an idea about that. Okay.
And talk about, I don't think that people realize the importance of balancing your spine. Talk a little bit about that before you talk about what you love, because people are like, should I go to acupuncture? Should I go to a massage therapist? Should I go, you know what I mean? And so talk a little bit about the importance of, like, if you know, help them understand why chiropractic care is so important. I have my own chiropractor.
Yeah, that's fine. So, and what I like to tell people is this, when you think about your body, the more balanced your body is, the less likely it is to get harmed. Like if you have a car with the two tires are like this, they're nice and even, but if one tire is off like that, that tire is likely going to wear out over time as you're driving the car. So you're kind of want to think about your spine as the baseline for your whole body. And from your spine, nerves are coming out from your brain to control all the different tissues and organs inside the body. So what I'd like to do, if you're okay with this, Dr. Donahue, I have some props and things like this. And I'm going to be talking about basically what we would like to see the neurology of how a person develops from birth to an adult. What would be the ideal? And then I'll talk about how stresses can impact it and change things and cause problems for people. Is that okay?
Oh, good.
All right. So I drew some pictures here. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. If I bring this up.
Absolutely. Love it.
You can see it okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So I like to say that a healthy brain is a brain that is an inhibitory. So what does inhibitory mean? Inhibit means you're trying to prevent something from happening. So when a brain is healthy, the majority of what it's actually doing is stopping things from going on, because you don't want everything happening in your body all at once. Your brain wants to be very specific. And when it's very specific, your body can be very healthy. So I'm going to go talk about the scenario. We say your body goes from a C-shaped curve to a straight and then back to a C-shaped curve again. So what does that mean? When we're in the womb as a baby, we're usually shaped like this. As your brain gets healthier, this should happen. And then when people get older and the brain starts to degenerate, this starts to happen again. So we go from a C shape to vertical and back to a C as the brain kind of progresses through life. So a healthy brain will cause this. So I'm going to go over what we would like to see in a brain as the baby develops, okay? So from conception inside the womb, the baby's here, and the baby is just basically a bundle of reactive activations and things, just like we call them brainstem reflexes. And these reflexes are in this low part of the brain right here called the brainstem. And that's just basically keeping you alive. But we can't have a fully developed brain because we would never be able to get out. So most of our brain development comes after we come out of the womb. So the majority of the brain is at the beginning is just reflexive actions. And they're trying to help the baby to come out of the birth canal. So there's these things called primitive reflexes that we have in the brainstem, which will make automatic movements. So if I stroke the back of a baby on one side, I should see their spine should curve like this. So that's called the Galant reflex. And as the baby's coming out of the womb, that helps the baby wiggle its way out. And as the baby's head coming out, there's something called the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. When the head goes like this, it pushes the arms down like that, so the baby can kind of project out of the birth canal. And then there's other reflexes. When you turn the head, these two legs should extend and these two should flex. So they're all different things there that are baseline stuff, but that's all survival reflexes. And as the brain gets healthier over time, different parts of the brain should start to develop. So first we have a brain stem, and then we start to develop the things called the cerebellum, which are back at the brain. There's way more neurons in the cerebellum than most of the rest of our brain. But what the cerebellum does is starts to refine and fine tune the movements. So instead of all this wiggly stuff, it starts to get a little more coordinated, okay? And so then after that part, these primitive reflexes, as your baby's developing and the brain is starting to develop, there's other reflexes that should come on top of them called postural reflexes. So let's say I have a baby that's maybe 4 months old. They should be able to sit up on their own. If I give a baby a little shove like this, their body, this side should contract and they should try to keep their head straight as they're going that way, and they should extend their arms to not fall. So these are called automatic postural reflexes, which we would like to see there. And they're kind of inhibiting, if you want to call it, these primitive reflexes. The primitive reflexes are all survival. And if I know most people might talk about what we call the sympathetic and the parasympathetic part of our nervous system. Most people understand sympathetic being the fight or flight, parasympathetic being the rest and digest. We're basically born all sympathetic, and that causes flexion. Sympathetic causes flexion in the body, and it causes like spontaneous movements, and the heart rate is fast. Like a baby's just born, the heart rate is fast, the breathing is fast, and etc. And then as the stimulation from the environment starts to come in, light, sound, movement, especially moving the spine, moving the baby, that will start stimulating the brain, and the brain starts to get higher development. And the way the development works on the body is it goes from the bottom to the inside the brain, and then from the inside outside like this, and then it goes from the right hemisphere over to the left hemisphere. That's kind of how the development should go. So if we have these primitive reflexes, they're going to be superseded by postural reflexes. And as the right side of the brain is starting to get stimulated, there's different parts over here. There's a part of your brain called the thalamus, which is the big relay center. So remember in the old days where there was those ladies that had the phones and they would grab the cables and connect your call, right? Think of the thalamus as the relay center for the body. There's information coming in from the body, and the thalamus is saying, okay, that's got to go to the brain. This has got to go to this part of the brain, this part of the brain. So stimulations from the body get to the thalamus and they get sent out to the rest of the brain. What we would like to see is the relay centers getting healthy. Then there's a part of the brain called the basal nucleus, which will start to organize our motor patterns or how we move. Then there's a part of the brain called the insula on the side here. And what this is really important. It helps us perceive what we call interoception. Interoception means the ability to feel your organs. Has anybody had like a big gas bubble in your stomach and you get that big cramp? You want to be able to feel the inside of your body as well. So that is important because the right hemisphere develops what we call your emotional quotient, not your IQ, but your EQ. So the right side just basically sets us up as humans. So we'll understand body language, we'll understand behavior, we'll understand if mom's mad at us just by looking at her face and the tone of her voice. That's what the right hemisphere does. We have to be set up as humans because humans are a species that we're connected with each other, and that gives us happiness. So our right brain is all happiness, our left brain is all pleasure, basically. We need other people for happiness. So when we understand how we feel inside our body, then there's another set of neurons over here called the mirror neurons. When mom smiles, I smile, I feel what that feels like inside my body, and then I know what she's feeling when she's giving that expression to me. So when mom smiles, I make the same movements, and the mirror neurons make me do the same movements. And then I know I perceive that sensation on the inside of my body, and that's how we feel feelings. The gut instinct, all that stuff is all right hemisphere stuff, okay? It's really important that all that develops. Then all these connections, we start getting these, we call them association pathways in our brain, where I see a book fall and then I see it, but then there's an association pathway to my ear that says, oh, that's what that sounds like when a book falls. And I know if that's dangerous or not, or what that sound is related to. Then your brain develops all these connections on this side. And then when it's really healthy and that's all really good, after about 3 years of age, there's a big shift over to the left side of your brain where we'll start to develop our IQ. This is where we start to remember our life, because most of us don't remember our life before 3, but then from 3 on, we start to remember more things when you think back. This is all serial thinking. This puts things in order. This kind of sees the big picture. So you know how many people think if I have a stroke on one side of my body, it's only going to affect one side. If you have a stroke on the right side of your brain has a global map of your whole body. The left side is really only the opposite side. And so the right side has to be there as the baseline. And when we're born, we actually have way more neurons in our brain, from my understanding, than when we do as an adult. But why is our brain bigger? There's a big thing called pruning that's happening when we're developing. I describe it like this. There's 2 cities here. These are two twin towns. There's about 100 people here, and there's about 400 people here trying to develop the city. So on this side, there's lots of potential streets that we could walk on, or trails, but they're all made out of dust. So the more you walk on this path, the more the path gets more obvious and more people can work on it. But if there's a bit of a wind and you're not walking on some of the other paths, they'll just disappear. So this pruning effect, if there's certain stimulations to the brain that don't get utilized, then those neurons they kind of wither away. But the ones that you do get used, to get more and more connected with each other. You probably heard the neurons that fire together, wire together. So more neurons connect with each other. They'll get thicker and thicker, and they'll get faster and faster, and they start connecting with each other more and more. And when this side is all developed, when this side of the city is all good, and we all know how to act like a human being, then we're going to come over here and we're going to start to learn how to do our life, basically. So we have like a super highway connecting the two. And then over here, we're going to start developing how to read, understand words, and things like that. So the left hemisphere will read the words, but the right hemisphere will understand the story. That's kind of how you want to think about your body. So that's the ideal, okay? So if everything goes through good in life, we're going to have both sides of the brain developing, the right one first. And what happens is, as I mentioned before, sympathetic activity causes flexion. When the right hemisphere starts to develop, it starts to inhibit or calm down the sympathetic nervous system. Because you see a baby, it's all like this, right? Then as the baby's getting healthier, we're going to start to see extension. So this side of the brain, there's a thing called the PMRF on the one side. It inhibits the flexing muscles, and we start to activate our extensors. So that's how we start to look up. So it's really important that you give a lot of tummy time for babies. Almost 80% of their time should be on their tummy, because we need them to develop this extensor tone to be able to stand upright as humans. So now I'm going to go into maybe the whole tech with stress and life stresses. Is that okay?
So good.
Follow
Go
me
for
so
it.
far?
You got it. Yeah, take a drink.
All right, good. So I want to talk about tone, just to give you an idea. I drew a picture of two babies here, okay? So like I said, I work with a lot of kids on the spectrum and things like that. The right hemisphere develops the general tone of all the muscles in your body, and the left hemisphere is more specific for fine motor things. So if the right hemisphere is working well, it's going to inhibit my flexors and cause extension. So most of the kids on the spectrum, we know that they have like a right hemisphere weakness or deficit. So if you look at these two babies here, if I look at these two, which one do you think might I be looking at thinking, okay, I might be a little worried about that child's development? Hopefully we're going to say this one, right? Because
Yeah.
it's lacking the extensor tone. So lack of tone in babies, like if I pull a baby like this and I lift them up, there's something called head leg. We look for that in babies. If I see head leg in a baby that's past 3 months old, it's a very big red flag that there's something going on and the brain is not developing the tone of their muscles, okay? So I'm going to talk about just general life stresses for an adult, and I'm going to show you how that impact your posture a little bit, okay? So we're going to pull this back a little bit so I can show you something. All right, so I got my two hemispheres here. The way we live in our life, what our technology, would you say that's a right brain thing or a left brain thing?
Drop in the chat.
What do you guys think?
You guys think it's a left brain or right brain? Don't ask me. I know the answer. You guys get involved. What do you guys think? Just guess. We got left.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, so our technology is all pleasure-based, quick dopamine kind of give me the quick rush. And what that's doing is it's causing our brains to have more of a dominance on our left side. And we're not going out in nature anymore, walking, we're not socializing as much as we used to. And so our right brain is starting to get a deficit. So I'm going to show you what could hypothetically happen to my body here. Hopefully you can still hear me.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so I'm going to show you my hands here. So normally if I'm healthy, I'm going to just pull my camera down a bit. I'm just going to show you what this should look like, okay?
Awesome. So
So if both sides of my brain are working properly, the muscles on the front and on the back of my body should be even. And this arm should hang straight down the side of my body like that. My toes should be straight and my ears should be over the top of my shoulders. But if I start to get a right hemisphere that's not working well, I want you to think about this. A lot of people say, okay, one side of my brain is controlling this arm. So I have to lift this arm. Everyone thinks my right hemisphere is lifting my left arm. But a lot of the information before I do that actually has to come down on the same side. So the right side of my brain has to control what we call the shunt stabilizers on this side to stabilize my body before I make the movement. Because if I just do that, I would just fall over. So my brain has to prepare this side of my body. So lots of information comes down the same side first before I'll make a movement over there, okay? So if my right hemisphere is weaker, it's not going to be inhibiting my flexors on this side as much. And we see a general pattern over and over again with people. Everybody in society is going to start having this. Their chest muscle is going to be a little tighter on the right side, and that's going to cause their hands to look like this on that side. You see that? Instead of being down on my side, it's kind of turned in a bit like that. The other thing that might happen is their bicep might stay tight and they'll always bend like this. So there's some people, they're standing totally relaxed. Instead of their arm like this, it's always bent a little bit like that. That's their resting pattern. There's a bit of excessive tone in their bicep. And then on the same side, what happens is, just so I can give you a little caveat here. So when we're like this is our development. The arms and legs are kind of facing each other like this. Okay, they're both facing in. And then as we start to develop and go up, the bottom half of our body turns back the other way so the legs can go around. So when we look at the neurology, we kind of divide your body in half, and we call it the T6 or the sixth vertebrae. So above T6, this side is going to be inhibiting the front compartment, and below T6 is going to be inhibiting the back compartment so we can stay upright. Okay. So on the bottom side, what will happen is that instead of my feet being like this, the hamstring might pull that foot out to the side like that. So this person is going to have a tendency to have maybe calcific tendonitis because their arm is always tucked in like this. They might always have pulls on their bicep. These might be tight, and that might cause shoulder problems as well. They might end up having carpal tunnel on this side all the time because these flexors are always a bit tighter, causing imbalances here. And then they'll usually end up having hamstring pulls, calf problems, or ankle sprains on the same side. So that's when the right brain is weak. That's typically what might happen down the right side of the body. Okay, just because of our technology pushing us all towards this left-sided thing. So I'm going to go through a couple of scenarios, if you're okay with this, with kids and things like that. Is that okay?
Yeah, so good.
So as the baby's coming down like this, typically the head comes down and it starts to come out. And there's a maneuver called the Ritkin maneuver in the hospital. And what happens is as the baby's head comes out, the doctors will usually try to grab it and go like this to clear the top shoulder often. So when you do that really big pull like that, that can actually cause a bit of distress on the upper vertebrae here. So most of the people on I know people have been following you for a while, they've probably all heard of the vagus nerve, right? So there's a few nerves that come out right in front of this. If there's a hole in your head here where there's blood vessels and nerves come out, it's right in front of the first and second vertebrae in our neck. So if this happens, if the doctor happens to pull really hard, and sometimes it's necessary, it's just, you got to get the baby out, right? So if they do that, then there could cause strain and inflammation here. So let's say the mother's had a highly inflammatory diet and eating lots of, refined sugars and everything, setting up the baby for a bad situation too, lots of inflammatory state. So if there's a big inflammatory state in the upper vertebrae here, that might start irritating the vagus nerve on this side. So our brain is actually developed by motion. So when your joints in your spine move, they actually stimulate your brain. So there's something called proprioception. So I know I have two fingers there, even though I'm not looking at it, because when I move the joints, it sends stimulation to my brain over here, and I know exactly where my body is in space, okay? So I want everybody to think about if there's a sudden loss of information. Let's say you're walking in a place that you're like an uneven territory and you're not familiar with the landscape, and all of a sudden it goes pitch black. There'd be a bit of an increase in your stress response because you kind of don't feel your body. You're going to be a little more cautious, and we call it hypervigilant. So the same thing can happen to your brain when parts of your body don't move properly as well. So chiropractors have this thing, what we call a vertebral subluxation, meaning that the bones in the spine, they should all be moving freely in all directions. But when we have a certain kind of stress, like a birth trauma or an accident or bad posture over time, it might cause certain vertebrae to stop moving. And when they don't move, that's kind of like a dead area in your brain. And there's something called the somatosensory strip where your brain perceives your body in space. And that should be very, very sharp. And you should know exactly where your body is at all times. If tell somebody to touch the tip of their nose with their finger with their eyes closed, they should do this. But many people will kind of miss their nose or be overshoot or undershoot and that kind of thing. So when that part of your brain is not perceiving your body properly, it gets a little fuzzy. So these little, we call them dead zones of lack of stimulation to the brain. That part of the brain doesn't get as much stimulation. And then it kind of causes a bit of a stress response because your brain is not perceiving your body completely. If you can't perceive your internal organs completely, that's a stress response too. So if we go through this birth process where the doctor pulls, okay, that's a necessary thing sometimes, but it might cause inflammation or irritation on the vagus nerve on the right side. And there's a lot of sensors inside the nerves here. I got another little toy to show you here. So this is a model of the spine. Okay, so I'm kind of looking this way. These are all the little muscles here. And this is right up at the top of your skull at the back. These little muscles here at the very top of the first couple of vertebrae, they're really, really full of, we call them joint receptors and muscle spindles, which are receptors for how much a muscle is being stretched. And these muscles here are way more full than any other part of your body. Like in your lat muscle, the big one at the back, there might be 4 of those receptors per square centimeter of tissue. In here, there's probably more than 100 per centimeter of square tissue because your head is so delicate. Yet if you're going to hit something, you have to be really quick and be able to move it. So all these little muscles down the spine here that go between the vertebrae, in the past, they thought they actually moved the joints, but what they're finding is they're just full of these sensors, and they're just like a sensor relay system to your brain. So your brain knows where your spine is. Because if you think about it, humans are really the only people or the only animals walking upright on 2 feet comfortably and efficiently. So the brain needs constant stimulation from every joint in your back to know where you are in space. If we start to lose those signals from a subluxation, vertebrae not moving, then parts of your brain will start to lose contact with your body, and then you'll start to have problems that might develop. So for example, that spot there, if that stress came on, the vagus nerve is right there. So if that vagus nerve is irritated and not working right, that might cause problems with swallowing. It might cause problems with your digestive system. So as I went through and the initial discussion, if everything is going right, the right hemisphere should develop good. The parasympathetic system should start to develop your stomach, close the tight junctions in your intestines, start to cause stomach acid to be produced so you can digest mom's breast milk and all those kind of things. But if you have an irritated vagus nerve right from the birth process, then this itself might be painful for the baby and they might be crying, and we call it colic. But because the vagus nerve is not working right, that might actually upset the digestive system, cause lack of stomach acid, lack of peristalsis from the contraction of the swallowing mechanism, and all sorts of things can happen from there. And then if that vertebrae is stuck for a long time, then this side of the brain won't get constant stimulation from the movement, and that will cause the right hemisphere to have a bit of a deficit, and then we'll have the people have the right-sided problems with the shoulder problems and hip problems as they go later in life. But as a baby, it might be a colic problem, might be crying, upset stomach, problems digesting their food, etc. Okay, so those are some of the things that can happen there. Any questions so far?
No, I mean, I love this. Does the audience, anything coming up for the audience? You guys drop a, I got this in the chat if it's making sense. He's going through so much, but this is what
How
I
much
do
time do
every
I have
day.
left, Holly?
What's that?
How much time do I have left?
About 15, 18 minutes.
Oh, that's still quite a bit. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the whole spectrum, the autism thing. Okay, so if there's a very subtle deficiency on the right side, that might cause little postural problems. But if during the development, when they're actually laying down the streets on that side, if there's a big trauma to the nervous system at that point, the right hemisphere might have a really bad deficit. And we kind of find that kids on the spectrum, we call it an unevenness of skills. They have a really good left hemisphere stuff, but the right hemisphere didn't get laid down properly, and those streets are all kind of dusty and they're not connected well. So they don't feel the inside of their body. They don't feel the interoception. And then they don't feel their outside of their body, and they become sensitive too. So that whole idea of interoception, being able to feel your body, means you'll be able to feel somebody else's, like what they feel too. So often the kids on the spectrum, they seem distant, they're not connected, the whole social thing, all of that stuff is kind of limited, but they have amazing skills over here. Like I have a bunch of kids that have hyperlexia. They're like 1 year old and they're reading stop signs and reading words and stuff like that, but they have no idea what any of that means, but they can just say the words because they understand it from their left hemisphere. So we call that an unevenness of skills between their brains. So what we kind of do, Dr. Holly, I sent you that video of the autistic child that I worked with, right? So when we're doing our work, the network spinal care that we do, we're doing very light touches on the spine, just in little spots like that. And what we're trying to do is signal the brain to find where those dead zones are here. And we want the body to say, look, there's this area of lack of motion here. If you start to breathe into that spot, the spine will move. It'll breathe a little more. That'll stretch some of those receptors. It'll send a little more signal to the brain. The brain will start realizing these spots that aren't moving well, and it'll actually say, oh, we need to do something there. So we might see little twitches on the table. We might see people repositioning their body, breathing a little deeper into that spot to help the brain reconnect with every joint in the spine. Because every single joint in the spine, they should all be moving like this freely. When somebody's lying down, you should have a good breath and everything should separate. All that will stimulate the brain and keep it healthy. So with the autistic kids, sometimes, you saw that at the beginning, he was kind of running around and kind of hard to control. And then over time, as I was doing more and more of the visits, you see that he was starting to get calmer. And he was doing things on his own and paying attention and following instructions and things like that, right? And so that's kind of one of the things we like to do with the whole spectrum of autistic kids. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll do specific work on the left side of the body to try to send stimulation to the right hemisphere to try to balance it out. Because I don't want to do the same thing on both sides. Because if you have an imbalance and you train both sides, you'll just have more of the same imbalance. So we want to try to target motion, or sometimes what I do with kids, because they don't feel their body very well, I try to squeeze their joints very firmly and squeeze that side of their body to send deep pressure stimulation to the right hemisphere, because it likes that kind of deep pressure. That helps it stimulate it as well. And sometimes you do fast little pushes, pulls on the joints, maybe that might send more stimulation to this cerebellum and over to that side of their hemisphere to create more activity, because we're trying to balance out the imbalances in their brain. And sometimes we see different things like that. So that whole concept of the interoception, I wanted to talk about one of my clients. I used to work in Italy for about 16 years. And when I was there, there was an autistic kid that the parents brought to me. He was about 18 years old and he was never potty trained. He always pooped in the diaper basically his whole life. And as we started doing the network care on him, I would see that he would move quite a bit on the table and he'd really connect with the care. And I saw the breath moving through his spine and everything was moving well. And after about a month into care, because up to that point, he would just poop and whatever. Mom would always change the diapers. The mom said he just kind of bolted across the room and he pulled his pants down and he went and he pooped on his own for the first time, because that whole interoception, the ability to feel the inside of the body, he was actually finally getting those signals to his brain. And then he actually, so then he started to feel his inside and he could make more, productive things for his life and feel his body. So that was a really important thing. So just improving the proprioception from the spine to the brain, help the brain develop more, bring more of those parts online that would control the body better. And then he would start to perceiving even the inside of his body. And that helps that, the person have more functioning in his daily life. Right? That's the kind of thing I wanted to talk about there. All right, so any questions so far?
There was a question there's a question that said, how would somebody know that they're experiencing a deficit that might have been caused at birth?
Yeah, that's a challenging one, because it won't always show up as a symptom, so to speak. A lot of times, I always tell people only about 10% of our nervous system might give us like sensations. The other 90% is just like making organs function and controlling your heart beating, but you don't feel those nerves. So I always tell people basing your health on how you feel is one of the worst indicators, because there's many people that feel great now and they might die of a heart attack in 5 minutes. So they weren't really healthy 5 minutes previous, but they just didn't feel anything because nothing was bugging one of their sensory or sensation nerves. So for babies, there's a few things we look for. One of them is a head tilt. So a lot of things about our posture, I wanted to mention this too. Pretty much everything below our clavicle is just a reflex. So we really have to make sure all this works properly to have everything down below work properly. There's something in your brain called the vestibular system. And that really drives more of your spinal tone than anything else. If this side of my vestibular system is not working right and this one is working, I might feel like my body's going like this. And I'll always be pulling myself back thinking I'm falling. So regardless of how much stretching or relaxation or yoga or chiropractic or whatever, if we're not trying to improve that imbalance, this side of the body will always be tight on that person, regardless of what they try to do to make it go away. Because if the brain thinks you're falling, it's always going to do something to correct you. So one of the things we look for babies is a head tilt. So if your right hemisphere is not working efficiently, these muscles will be less inhibited, and then they'll end up having a bit of a turn like this. So a head tilt is one of the quick things we look for. The other one is a lag in their muscle tone. You pull up a baby, they should start engaging their neck pretty quickly, within a month or so, even right away. I had a lot of kids right off the bat, they're good, but it's a little worrisome if it's 1 or 2 months down the road and you pull them up like that and their head lags behind and they don't engage. That's a potential thing. The other thing would be colic, not feeding well. And one of the other things, I want to give you a little gems here for the moms here. So hopefully you're breastfeeding your baby. That's the most important thing you could do for the baby's health and your health as well. But sometimes it happens that you have to bottle feed them, right? So a healthy baby should feed on both sides comfortably like this. Like a full feed will be, half the time here, half the time there. So if you think about how the baby is, when the baby's on this breast, they might be like this. So the bottom ear and this side of their body is kind of limited. And so they don't really see much out of their right eye and their right ear. But mom would naturally do the breastfeed here and the breastfeed here. So that information coming in one side is going to stimulate one side of the brain, and then the other side will stimulate the other side of the brain. So often when people are bottle feeding babies, they'll always do with the side that's more comfortable for them, and they might be blocking this. So I always tell people, feed them half the time this way and switch it over, even though it's uncomfortable for you. It's better for your baby to do this too, so that they're getting, bilateral stimulation to get those kind of things happening. So those are kind of some of the things you can look for a baby. And as a chiropractor, we'll actually use our pinky finger and go down the spine and try to find those areas, because every joint should be like springy, like my finger joint. It should just go pink, 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 pink. If it's subluxated, when I push on it, it won't be springy. It'll be a little firm to the touch, and it'll often be tender, and the muscles around it will probably be tight as well. And so it's important that we kind of do this check right up through the whole spine to try to find those areas that are like dead zones, we call them, if you want to call it that. Okay. So the handout that I gave you, I want to talk about this little part as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, totally.
I'm okay to keep going?
Yeah, you're good. You just had one question before we jump into the
Sure.
handout. We'll do it at the end. What are causes of left side deficits that are caused from right or left side?
Okay. So left side deficits they would more likely happen after 3 years of age, because basically the brain does 3 years on one side, 3 years on the other, and it kind of switches back and forth until you get bigger. So a left side deficit will usually be a chemical trauma of some sort, like a mercury thermometer being broken or something like that, while the left side is developing. So between 3 and 6 years of age. It could be just from postural things like this. So they might be more subluxated on one side and less stimulation going to that side of the brain, depending on how they may have had a trauma when they were younger. So if the right side of the body is not moving as well, the left hemisphere might have a bit of a lack of activity and lack of connection. And so when the left hemisphere is not working right, that's often where we'll see more learning challenges and dyslexia. So because I said the left hemisphere puts things in order, and if it's not working right, then the order of the words or the order of the letters might be inverted or something like that. So they'll have difficulty like focusing or reading the words properly. So those are kind of things like that. So sometimes it's like falls and injuries. So just to give you an idea, like even what could happen like with curves, right? So if somebody gets pulled out like this and they have a bit of a trauma on that side, if you ever somebody's punched you like this, you usually go, ow, and you kind of contract, right? So if there's been a trauma during the birth process or some fall or some wipeout when you're a little kid, we wipe out so many times, fall off the change table and all sorts of things. If one of those wipeouts happen at up in the upper neck, if it causes tension, it could be a right hemisphere. It could just be tension from a fall. Let's say this happens here. So when that baby starts to lift its head up, it doesn't like the horizon being crooked. So what it'll actually do is it'll actually shift the whole body like this, so that the eyes stay level. But then when that kid grows up, they'll have a curve in their spine because of that reflex mechanism from the eyes, right? So those are some things that can happen. So it's really important that the eyes are level and they work in harmony and those kind of things too. So sometimes with kids, I'll do this little convergence test where I'll bring my finger towards their eyes like this. Both eyes should come in really evenly like this. But if there's a right hemisphere deficit, what might happen is the right eye might come in and then it'll kind of lose its convergence hold. Well, if I shine a light in that eye, it usually should just go pink. But if it's weak, it might go pink and then start going like that, like it's trying to hold on to the contraction. We call that a hippus thing when your eye is doing this with the sphincter in the eye. So those are all little things that we can kind of look at to gauge what might be happening. So once again, motion, movement in the spine. We want to make sure all the vertebrae are moving as freely as they can, and the spine is balanced to keep your brain balanced and have good signals coming in both sides of the body. Did that answer that? I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, no, totally. So why don't you talk a little bit about your free giveaway? Dr. Marco was so gracious in giving us a free PDF, I believe it is, and
a simple one-page PDF.
Yeah, so it's 3 simple neuro-based exercises that you can do at home from kind of what he showed here, I'm assuming. So if you want to talk a little bit about it, and that'd be great.
That's perfect. So part of the network spinal care, the guy that invented network care also came up with something he calls the 12 stages of healing. So he's looked at thousands of people over the years and watched how they develop and how they talk and what they say to themselves and how they move their body. And he noticed that sometimes people can do certain things with their hands that kind of connect with that stage of their healing process. So I'm just going to kind of show you the stage 1. And I'm going to simplify it a little bit just for the general public. And on that sheet of paper that you're going to get, it's got 2 sides to it. I'm going to show you what it should look like, and then I'll show you some common things that we see. So remember how I talked about these dead zones, right? They're really bad when they're in their spine because your brain needs that sensors to know where you are in space. But the dead zones can also happen on the front of your body as well. So if there's a concept called tensegrity, if anybody's heard of that. So the cells in our body normally have like a surface tension, and the cell should be nice and fluid and mobile, right? But if you're eating a lot of trans fats and things, the cell membranes maybe get a little stiff and things don't come in and out the way they're supposed to, and it can cause challenges with your health. So we kind of found out that your body can hold on to physical, chemical, or emotional stress, and it might change the tensegrity or the tension of your cells. So a healthy cell would be like this, and it's nice and mobile and free. So if all the cells in my upper chest are nice and free, if I breathe into that spot, I should be able to expand it really freely without a lot of resistance. So this SRI exercise I'm going to show you, it's not a breathing exercise. It's not just like doing box breathing for your parasympathetic nervous system or something like that. It's a very specific thing. We're trying to find out where your body's holding tension. And the concept is we want to find where you're working right and help the other parts that aren't working right, as opposed to trying to fix the bad spot. We're just trying to expand the good stuff. So you'll see on the sheet of paper, if you download the PDF, there's 3 parts on the front of your body that we're going to check in with. One is out on the upper chest here. One is just kind of over the, just below the sternum, the first part that gets mushy. And then one is your belly button. So if all the tissues from here, front and back, if they're all free and moving without any tension, I should have good expansion in those spots. So when we do the SRI exercise, we're going to do 4 things at the same time. I'm actually going to touch my body, so that's stimulating some nerves over here. I'm going to pay attention to where I'm touching it, so that's another part of my brain. I'm going to try to move that spot, so that's another part. And then I'm actually going to try to breathe too. So I'm doing 4 things at the same time. So it's really trying to wake up the whole brain to become aware of your body, to help that sort of interoception, so to speak, as well. So the ability to perceive your body's tension patterns. So the first part here, there's that little notch right there. If I put one finger underneath that, I'm going to bring my hand up to that spot. And when I touch here, the goal of the exercise is to just breathe where your hand is. So I don't want my belly and anything else breathing. I just want it to move here. So the breath is in through your nose and out through your mouth. So it should look like this. Okay, so I should feel full expansion. And as you do this on the piece of paper, it says you're going to do like a little mapping. You're going to do 2 breaths in each one of these spots to find which one is the easiest for you. 80% of the public has difficulty with the middle one. So you have the sternum, these are the bones, and the first part that gets mushy underneath the sternum, that's what I'm actually covering with my hands. So if you can watch this here, I'm going to show you what it should look like. So when this expands, it should come out right here. I shouldn't be breathing here or here. I want it to be in this spot right here. So it should look like this. And then the last one is my belly button. So my hands are here, and this should come in and out when I breathe like this. So 80% of the public is going to have difficulty with the middle one. When they put their hands here, this is almost a dead zone in a large percentage of your population, because most of our emotional stress gets locked up right here. And what do we say in English when you're worried or stressed about something? I got butterflies in my, I got knots in my, right? So it's very common that this area here, the whole digestive system doesn't work really free. So when people put their hands here, what happens is they kind of breathe above and below it, and it's kind of going on both sides, but it's not really going on that spot specifically. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to show you what it should really look like, okay? So here's my chest here. This is the sternum part right here. This is hard. This is the first part that's mushy. Now, if you watch my hands here, this is actually what's going to come in and out here like this. And most people have difficulty doing that in that spot. So that's a really important thing. So the way the exercise works is you find which one of the 3 works easiest. You do more repetitions on the easy spot and try to help the part that's not working so well. So we're trying to spread the piece and spread that free moving cells into the part that's holding on to tension. And a lot of people notice that they'll have better digestion even just by doing this. Okay. So that's kind of the goal of that sort of connection exercise. And I kind of simplified it. You know, there's different ways to do it, but I kind of found that that's easy for left brain people to have you already do a 3-1-3-1, and it's all written out on that piece of paper and how you're supposed to do the connection. So that should help everybody.
So good. Thank you, Dr. Marco. I know people are commenting in the chat, such great information. And you just going through that, I don't think people realize how important the nervous system is connecting to the spine and the connection and what's blocked. In Chinese medicine, it's qi. With you, it's like the nervous system piece. And, that's why it's so important for you to get supported in different natural health style practitioners like knowledge and skill set. Because remember, all of us that are in functional medicine, chiropractic, naturopathic, you saw Dr. Marco work on the whole body. He didn't just like focus on the heart or focus on the kidney, like our systems are in American medicine, right? Or Canadian medicine is the same as well, where they're looking at just a system. He's looking at the whole body and figuring out where the blocks are in the body and what that gets to look like and how that could be limiting you from a nervous system standpoint. So you can go to the speaker dashboard and download that PDF from Dr. Marco. And then I believe in your bio and on the speaker dashboard, there's a way to get in contact with you. But just so that somebody just asked, what's the best way that you like people to connect? Do you have a website that they can link on where they can connect with your staff, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so the best way is probably the website of the office. So it's called networkfamilycarecenter.com. The center is spelled the American way with the ER on the end. So networkfamilycarecenter.com is the office website. And then from there, people can know where we are and, appointment requests can be done on the website and that kind of thing. The office phone number is 905-477-8900. And
I'll do that again, 905.
905-477-8900.
8900.
Basically the northeast end of Toronto, more or less. Okay.
Right.
And the website the email is info@Network Family Care Center if somebody wants to send an email to the office.
Oh, I forgot. Chest Care Center. Sorry, guys. That website I just put in adds centers at the end of it. So in networkfamilycarecenters.com.
It's just one, it's not plural, center, networkfamilycarecenter.com.
And are you spelled CENTRE?
No, ER, the American way.
.com. Network Family Care Center. Is that right? Networkfamilycarecenter.com.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate the work that you're doing. And I know many people were commenting in the chat that it was so informative. And let's thank Dr. Marco in the chat. This is the first, I remember meeting him and he's like, I've never done this before. What does it look like? How do and he did an amazing job. And it was just so informative, I think, for people to really understand the nervous system, the spine, and all of the connection. So I appreciate you and the work that you're doing in the world, especially around autism and babies. It's so needed because they just get to start at a young age from healing when they get into your chiropractic hands to really do that spinal network care for them is just so, so important. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. And they know to go to the speaker dashboard and download the PDF. And is there anything that you want to say before we close?
Once again, like I said, my first time ever doing a summit, so I'm glad your team reached out for me. I know it's not quite the topic of the summit exactly, but I said, well, blood sugar, you asked me what I'm good at, and I said, well, I'm kind of good at this stuff, so I could probably teach this. So you just said, go for it. So I'm glad you.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, if you have too much sugar in the body and you have inflammation, that's going to throw off when he's evaluating for nerve firing, right? So it could block some tissue and whatnot. So there is a relationship, and the key is that the whole body works together. And that's what Dr. Marco covered here. Yeah. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Dr. Marco, and for doing your first summit. I'm glad we got to have you here. And I'm sending you so many blessings for a beautiful holiday season ahead.
Thank you. You too. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully it was helpful, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.